start the recording anyway. That way I won't forget. Okay, it's rolling. Anyway, I was just saying this is the last of the webinar series, so-called, though some more may pop up as needs be. But what I thought I would do after this is make a bunch of videos that are like walkthroughs for each one of the filters and each one of the bindings, because there are no walkthrough videos yet for those. And I thought, well, gee, how handy that would be to just be able to pop in when I forget, when we forget what we went through in this webinar, to just pop in a 3-minute video that covers the basic stuff that we need to know. And so I know I'll find that useful 6 months to a year from now for sure. But I'm also going to cover some combinations that people have found already in the past that are working, what makes those utility racks work, for instance. And so there'll be a lot of stuff that applies to solo and to performer for sure. And for the solo users, having a really comprehensive video guide to those racks and bindings and filters, I think it's going to be really cool for them expand their horizons quickly. But like you were saying, Gabriel, in that email you sent me, it's a lot easier. If you're using states, you'd have that project done in seconds.
Yeah, much faster. I have just as an exercise, I try to do the same as the toggle controller toggle, or what is it called rack in the utility. But you need to set up lots of bindings, and then you need a plugin to send program changes. And I use Midi program change from Pete's Midi, so if you select a snapshot, and it sends a program change to the bindings, and the bindings switch on and off accordingly. But if you want to do the same with states, you just switch on and off yourself the roots, not the bindings, the roots, and then you save the state, and you're done. Okay.
Yeah.
I had to copy several times, 4 times, all the bindings, and each one has to be set the right way. And then you need to change the program number for each group. Okay, it's okay. It's useful to learn, but it's boring, cumbersome.
But if you can save it into a rack somehow, that makes it maybe
but okay, I could do it. I could do it for all the utility racks of the performer. I could translate them into solo equivalents, but okay, needs time.
Yeah. When you have 10 months, the next COVID
when I'm really
outbreak.
Bored, okay. When I will be sick of playing, playing for 24 hours a day. Okay, let's. I don't have even time for playing.
Yeah.
Okay, I would like to have more time for playing instead of doing. Okay.
That's what Torsten was just saying when he came on. He wondered if he'd ever play music again because he's doing all this programming.
Yeah. I spent 3 hours last night on one song trying to figure some things out, and I was like, "Why am I doing this?"
How's it called? Is it playing? Maybe I seem to remember it was called playing. What I'm doing. Okay.
Yeah, it's still playing.
Okay, but it's great if you are starting again to have live gigs over there and to go around after so long a time.
Well, as kind of a follow-up, I thought I'd just tie up a few loose ends of little nuances of things that we didn't really cover in the previous webinars that are little subtleties of some of the tools. And I even made a rack for organs. For
Yay!
yes, for 2 manual and pedals type organs. And so I'll show that because it kind of demonstrates some of the ideas that I'm going to talk about. But in the MIDI root, let me go ahead and share my screen and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Here we go. Okay, so you see the MIDI root settings page here in the dialogue, in the guides. And here's one of the things that I found interesting. Note that MIDI filters are applied after the regular MIDI root settings shown above. Okay, after. So even though in Cantabile the roots show up after the filters, no. The roots feed into the filters. So it actually goes in the other direction. But because the roots end up spelling out these huge lines, you can't really put them on the left side. You need the space in here. But that's just an interesting thing. And so I thought I was starting to bend my head around, well, that's kind of interesting because when you have these things like the program, the conditions, when you have the program or the condition here with the type of CC that you're using, then that can be changing the roots, and that root then feeds into your filter, creating different effects or taking advantage of different portions of the filter. You get what I'm saying? So just another little thing to wrap your head around is that it always goes from the roots, and then whatever you've done in here goes to the filter. So you see I've created some that have conditions off of the mod wheel, and this is off of my 249, and let me open up B3 and also rotary. Take your time loading there. Where's rotary? There it is. Okay, so what I've got now is a mod wheel. So I've connected these. Notice the pedals are connected to these. When I push the mod wheel up, I play the upper register instead. And my Leslie gets turned up. And it also gets turned up here. So the lower register is doubling on the pedals to add kind of a sub bass element to that lower manual. And it runs at low speed, which you would expect kind of for a bassy thing. And then I push that mod wheel up, and I've just sped up. And I've sped up, in this case, I sped up both. I did have to do a little MIDI learn action off of this, but so it's going to differ from VST to VST how I learn the organs thing. Once you've learned it, if you save the preset, it remembers it later on. Okay, so that's all very nice, and it all lives up in here. So what I did is, the first, for the upper panel, when it's greater than or equal to 64, I pass 1 over to channel 1, which is the upper manual. But nothing's getting passed to the lower manual. When I go have my mod wheel below less than 64, then I pass channel 2. I pass whatever's coming in becomes channel 2, and that's the lower manual. And then the third one is simply whatever comes in goes to channel 3, again, only if the mod wheel is less than 64. Okay? So you see, Douglas, our inspiration are from Monday.
Yeah,
Yeah, Douglas and I, we were brainstorming how would you make the the pedals and lower manual play together before, and so I got that. And this one is just handling it, sending it to 4 for the MIDI learn for the B3's own slow fast, so that works. Now to get this to MIDI learn, you have to do one thing. You have to go in here, and this is probably true with other VSTs. When you're in MIDI and you select your item, I'm going to have to close this to show you. Well, I can maybe move it out of the way. You got to make sure you turn off everything but the one that you want it to send, to get. The one that's sending on 4. Because notice, this one's sending on 1, this is sending 2, this is sending 3, and it completely discombobulates the poor plugin and confuses it to no end. And so once you've got it isolated where you're just sending 4, then you can move the thing and do a MIDI learn and learn the thing. And then you simply save it after you've got it successfully MIDI learned. So you see I've got 4 and with controller 1. All right. So that took me a bit of figuring out, why isn't this working? That kind of stuff. Okay, so of course this is very nice. Yeah, you all know how to do this. See, you can make this happen. You can go ahead and type all this stuff in yourself. Now that you've seen it, you could watch the video replay and type all this in. Or Terry can be kind, and he can make a rack that does the same thing. So here's a generic rack that has MIDI's outs going to the B3 and rotary. In this case, I don't have to send to rotary here either. And it's just got these all in as MIDI, rack MIDI in, out ports to rack MIDI out, and the same assignments. And so nothing to do here, just an in to an out with the routing. And but will it blend? It does. Okay, so that's great, and we can apply this because it's generic. Can be applied to any organ. And again, I had to do that MIDI learn thing with this coming from here, and isolate the channel 4 item before I did MIDI learn. And then when I saved later, saved this and saved the song, it all remembered it. However, how nice wouldn't it be nice to not even be bothered this far and forget this routing? We're still having to remember to do stuff. Oh, I hate having to remember to do stuff. So instead, let's get rid of this stuff. Let's make a rack that's self-contained with the B3V and rotary and all contained inside the rack. And, but I can't, and you got to do the same thing. Turn these off so it doesn't confuse it when you do the MIDI learn. But once you save it, it gets saved with this rack and remembers it in the future. Okay, so here we go again. And notice, as long as I'm holding, I can do my slow fast, but as soon as I let go. Neat, huh? So now this is, you can make this rack, becomes the template for adding, using replace plugin.
But in this case, the lower manual seems not doubled by the pedals, or I am mistaken.
I wasn't playing low enough.
Okay, sorry.
It's only the first 20, yeah.
And there's a transpose involved there. But let's go ahead and take a look again at that. So we have this one, you see there's a transpose -2 also. So it goes to 3, transposes at -2, so that the keys, those will play it. And it just uses the same condition. It's a great use for conditions. And so this way, one keyboard can take advantage of all three manuals that you've got on that organ, right? And you don't have to go to the pedals, and you could use bindings to turn that on and off. Oh, it's this one here. You could use pedals to turn the pedal on and off, so that you're not doing the sub or states, and voila. So that's kind of a really cool thing, and no filters involved at all, no fancy dancy anything, just straight through routing tricks. And that's it. It's just really nothing. And I just have the VSTs that I want and the effect all self-contained inside the rack, and away it goes. Okay, so I'll upload this thing to you guys. It's exclusive. It's only for people watching this video that you no, well, of course. Yeah,
it's $9.95.
$9.95. Or get it for free by sending me your email information and put you on a mailing list and send you gobs of marketing stuff. Anyway, okay, so all right, so that was to get into the routing discussion that I wanted to point out, that how I could start out with this experiment, and then I simply did this and right-clicked over the hamburger menu and said copy, created a rack, and pasted it in, and changed the routing. Okay? In the first case, I changed it to so that I had my rack MIDI and rack MIDI out, and just was doing alt to MIDI out, you see, alt to rack MIDI out. In the second case, I did my routing internally to the items that were inside, so I only had to put stereo out to the rack stereo out. And I also threw in a out channel 4 for recording purposes. I could rename a channel that I call organ recorder, right? And have that be always something I include in my recording set, is just whatever's coming out of this rack. All right, and of course some people don't like to just put through the Leslie. They like to double it, have the straight and the Leslie. And of course you could create a situation where you can crossfade those two also using a slider, with one at plus 0 to 127, the other 127 to 0, and use that as a crossfader to do a mix perhaps, or something like that. But that's beyond the scope of this discussion. Yeah, that's why I included it, right? Yeah. Okay.
That'd be interesting to look at some point in the future.
Do the crossfade? Yeah.
Fade on a pair of outputs.
Yeah. Well, it might be a little bit tricky because you might want volumes to stay keep the volumes high and not have one fading out. You want it all to stay consistent volume-wise, but yeah, maybe could mess with the curves.
Right.
Mess with the curves in there. Okay, so now another thing I wanted to show, besides this one, there's another item I highlighted. The lifetimes of songs and linked racks. And I found this interesting. When switching songs, the song and all routes between the song and its loaded racks are immediately closed, and any held notes are released. Embedded racks are closed when the parent song is closed. Okay, so people that are using a set list and you just change to the next song, whammo, all your notes are stopped, right? And everything turns off. And it loads in the next song, so you have to push new notes to make new sounds. Now that's fine in most cases, you're just going from song to song. However, linked racks only close when the current song no longer refers to them. So, really, has a difference from embedded racks. That the linked racks, if you switch between two songs that use the same linked rack, that rack will be kept loaded and continue to process uninterrupted. So you get what I'm saying? When you're doing those long Yes songs, you're doing the entire Close to the Edge album, and you're running through all these different songs, actually using songs instead of states, then yeah, go ahead, just hold that down, hold that note down. It's going to keep that VST, and all your VSTs get kind of recycled through that whole thing. So that's kind of an interesting difference, isn't it? At the link
I was actually unaware of that.
Yeah.
What's the point of using many songs instead of many states? Okay, if you have for a long suite, let's say, because for if you have separate songs in your set list, okay, I understand that it's reasonable to divide the gig into songs. Okay.
Yeah.
But suppose you have a very long concert, a very long suite that you have to play. In that case, states are the way to go, I guess. There's no reason why to divide
It depends.
performance into songs.
Here's my perspective on that, and how I always actually did have used this in the past. When I'm switching between songs, I very rarely go into a patter. I very rarely start talking about this and that and the other thing, and how when Joe wrote this song, he was actually hanging off of a bridge by his toes, and I don't go into all that kind of stuff. I often will continue with some kind of a lead or a solo element or some chord changes, some subtle, quiet chord changes, do a segue into it. And that's probably my church organ background from my teens that I got into that kind of a segue. So I create a musical segue. So therefore, as the one song is finishing, I'm going to go into that segue. I'll be using that rack that's got the instrument that I'm using, or the instruments that I'm using for that segue music. And now I've got songs loading in, and it should, theoretically, stay uninterrupted. And normally it actually does. So it behaves pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
So praise music is probably a pretty good feature, so you can switch songs and keep playing.
Yeah. Or you can be playing some interlude music while talking about Joe writing the song while hanging from a bridge, hanging from his toes. And, yeah. So, but that's probably the use case for it that's most likely in terms of song changes. Now, the recent concerts that I've been doing, I've totally cheated. The whole hour-long concert is one song, and I just use states to move between them, and that way I don't have any of these issues. I'm just changing states, just changing presets, and any presets I don't change, of course, they're staying the same. But sometimes it gets well, it doesn't really. I very rarely have an issue with that. And the nice thing is that if you change a preset, but you're still holding the notes down from where you do a patch change, I should stay. Do a patch change from the same preset, same VSTI. It'll hold the sounds until you play the next notes on many synths. A lot of synths will do that. The first synth I ever had that did that was my Korg Wave Station. I loved that feature because whatever preset you had loaded in, as long as I was still holding the notes down, that preset was still sounding. The only thing that would change would be the effect that was behind it. And that was actually a really cool aspect of it because it would create kind of a cue that something's just changed, even though the sound is basically the same or the same pattern, but the effect was suddenly changed just a little bit and kind of create this cue like a build-up. And then the next notes I'd play would use the full patch change. So anyway, that's that idea. All right, what else? What else do I have here? Then States has another interesting, a few interesting things. And that's in the exported settings for States. So if Gabriel wanted to go get a coffee now, he could.
Okay.
Yeah. But the exported settings are really cool because it lets, based on whether it's a song or a state, the states will change different things about a rack, about what's going on inside of the rack. Okay? So you can choose to have the song itself changing the states and override be the overriding principle. Or you can have it be totally driven by the rack's own states, and so it ignores the song changes. So let's go ahead and read through this. If only the first option, this one here, is selected, changing the selected state in the rack will not affect the setting. Okay? In other words, you can change your state in the rack, but it won't change. Switching parent songs or possibly parent song states will update the setting. So you go in, you change the parent song or the parent song states, it updates what's going on inside the rack. So it's on a song control. If only the second option is selected, switching songs or song states will not affect the setting, but changing the selected rack state will. So you confused yet? You should be. If both options are selected, the setting will be stored in both the rack state and the parent song. Changing the selected rack state will reset the parent song's saved settings to the settings that are saved in the rack state. So by doing that, the song ends up learning from the rack what the settings are that you desire based on those states. Now I'm going to definitely pull Torsten in here for commentary. And then if neither option is selected, the setting is not
filters.
just filters, right? If neither option is selected, the setting is not affected by the song or the rack state changes. All right, great. All right, so we have that so far, right? Everybody's not confused? Nobody's confused, right? Let me see. Look at this. See, Legler looks totally relaxed. It's great. I barely followed this dissertation here. But it's one of those things that I know I've used it a million times. When I need the song to update what's going on inside the rack, then I check this one with the little arrow over here. And when I need this to be controlled by the other thing, so this is all inside the rack. This is your state from when you selected the rack. So now it goes further. You can uncheck or check this exported state thing. So by default, the parent song will store a copy of each exported setting for each of the song states. But you can change the behavior with the exported state behavior of the parent rack slot. So now you get out of editing the rack, you click on the rack slot, and now you see on the lower left, you'll see the state behavior panel, and you remove the check mark from the exported state item. Okay, so now the songs are completely disconnected from the rack states. It's not going to change the rack states on you. No more control. You know what I'm saying? So, all right, well, it's one of those things that you have to kind of go through and try it out and watch what happens and experiment around with it. So now all settings exported from the racks will be stored on a per song rather than a per song state basis. So it's going to ignore your song state changes. You following me? The rack's not going to pay any attention to the song state changes. Because remember, there's state changes inside the rack and there's state changes inside the song. So for me, because I've been running my concerts with just a single song and a whole bunch of states I needed this always to be checked so that it would always send my state changes from the song into the rack. So there's your practical use explanation. I'm using one song, I'm using states for all the changes over for a full half hour or 45-minute piece. I need everything that I'm changing states in my songs, because I'm driving the whole thing with song states. And I need all those state changes to drive what happens inside the rack, to change the presets, to send binding changes, to whatever. If I have this unchecked, then my state changes don't have any effect over all that stuff inside the rack. So it's a little easier to fathom that idea. Have this checked if you want the states to have an effect on the thing. But then furthermore, you can go inside, edit the rack, and check and uncheck these things to determine how deep things go. Now these right here, these two little arrows, one thing that they're most deep about is when you want your embedded racks inside of a rack to be receiving the changes from the song states. Now this is where I have like a reverb rack inside of my processing rack. When I change song states, I want my final summing reverb to change for that part. I want it to be a different reverb with different settings, with a different state, everything different about that reverb. And I've got all my reverbs inside of one little embedded rack, and the states select between them. So I need to have this selected, this first one, so that it sends from the song's state with this checked, but also with this. So it sends from the song state inside of my embedded racks and also has an effect on them and changes their contents. Okay? So to me, it's easy to remember because the arrow, it's like it's pointing to the embedded rack. It's pointing inside of another rack. So hopefully that's clearer than mud. All right, so as it says, exported settings allow each song to adjust the setting and reduces the need to create multiple states in the rack. In fact, exported settings can often eliminate the need for rack states entirely. And that's exactly how I do use it. I'd use it to eliminate my reliance on rack states. So rather than changing the rack states, I just change everything from the song state level, because both of these are selected. Okay? And then the song state is driving everything, and I don't have to create all of these gobs and gobs of states for all the different types of situations that I might be in. The song drives it. So I just make a custom setup inside the rack that's just for that song, and the song remembers it. All right, now another item I wanted to look at was toggling multiple behaviors. Can you read that? Was green a bad choice?
No, it looks good.
Okay. Sometimes you might like to turn many state behaviors on and off, and doing so one at a time would be tedious. You're not kidding. We're talking about a bunch of check marks to the left of this items, right? To toggle multiple behaviors on or off at once, first select all the behaviors to be updated by using Shift or Control click or Shift and arrow keys, and then press Enter. Well, what do you know? And to toggle the exported state, use Control and Enter. So I did not know that. I always go through that whole thing. Click, 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 click. Oh, I missed one. Click, click. And this way you just sweep down, select the whole batch of things. I didn't know you just hit Enter or Control Enter. Now I know. Now you know. Okay, so, geez, what else is there to share? Really, there's so much more in states. It's the linked states, linked clones, all that stuff. But those are a couple of things I wanted to particularly cover. Let's just take a break for a second and try to screw our brains back in for a moment. Want to look again at some of the deeper performer bindings. I did sort of want to at least look at the list, look at the drop-down list of inputs and outputs today. I think that would be kind of handy.
Yeah, that would be good.
Yeah.
We actually covered a lot of ground.
We did. We covered a lot. Well, we went through all the output bindings. And we went to every filter. So there's a few things we haven't covered, like the quick controller. We really haven't talked about controller bar, stuff like that. But that's, once you've learned that, that's pretty simple. Of course, the bindings page, and we went deep into the bindings. And the bindings have all of these different things where in Solo, you just have the hardware items that you have as input ports. So all your input ports show up in here. And you get your loopbacks. But with the Performer, you can also get output from synths, which makes it handy because if you can use a arpeggiator, for instance, to derive output from, that can be sending signals, note signals, or controller information, not even heard with the audible part of the sequence, but is being passed through in order to control other aspects of things, and thus be changing the sound, like the filter, for instance, the sound of a completely different VSTI. You can change the recorder settings. Now, mind you, we're not changing this. We're reading whether the recorder has been started or stopped, or whether auto record has been turned on or off. So that's what this is. Remember, this is their inputs. So that's really kind of cool because you can read the recorder has been turned on and make that turn the transport on, for instance, just as an idea. Now, I think that's already a default operation, but if you've turned that off somewhere, you can override what you've turned off by doing it in here in the transport. And so when you turn on the recorder, it turns on to play or play stop. All right, so there's just another thing. You have the access to the racks by index name. So you have the rack that you're in, and you have your various racks and what happens with the rack, or you can pick it by the position that the rack is in the list, these as objects. So if something happens with the rack, then you can, based on these things that happened to the rack, you can make something else happen. Okay? Is running, is suspended. That's kind of a handy one. If you suspend this rack, make it suspend another rack, for instance. Anyway, change the color. So that's rack by index name. That would be the same as just selecting the rack from here. I get this group of things. But it's nice having the index. You can change by just changing the order of the racks in your list. You can change what's affecting what. PC keyboard is already an input in Solo. Let's use PC keyboard key presses and any window or main window or system-wide key presses, key releases to bring about different things. So you enter what the key is going to be, and so if I press J, something happens. So in this case, I've just made it so that J puts it into play mode. I'm not getting it to play yet. No, it's not working. Any thoughts why that wouldn't be working?
You try it into the see if it flashes, if the green light is blinking.
Yeah, it's not even blinking. This is just a song binding.
It works here. Yeah, it works. It works for me.
Okay.
But I don't have look back ports into sources. Do you have it in Performer? Can you see look back ports over there?
Yeah.
Gabrielle, have you enabled
are.
the loopback ports in the settings?
Yeah, I use them, but I don't have them in the sources in the binding. So it seems that solo doesn't have them.
That. Okay, thanks for confirming that one. Yeah, it's odd. You would think that nothing's happening when even if I push the play button, it's not starting my transport. So good thing I'm not doing this for an angry mob. Right. Just try it. It's because I'm a glutton for punishment. Now it works with T. T is fine.
Can't use J.
It hates J. It is a capital J.
Maybe it's a reserved key in
now it's working.
Cantabile.
I deleted it. I put it back in. It might have been because I got to it from another place. Remember, I was
You woke Jay up.
Yeah, I woke it up. But remember, I was trying other things. I had rack by index name in here before. And so maybe when I tried to go back the other way, go to PC keyboard from here. So that might be something we got to report. But now it works. Now it's happy as clam. All right. And see, it does make a capital letter.
He's probably setting it so it doesn't matter what case.
Yeah. Well, anyway, it's working now. So, crisis averted. Since spacebar already works, though, it's just hardly a very logical use for it.
A possible use for key presses could be to link them to ranges in the media player, so you can activate different ranges with different keys for looping or something like that. If you have a media player in your song, you have different ranges in the media player, then you can bind the different keys of the keyboard, of the PC keyboard. You can select a play range indexed or play previous range, next range. Okay, but
yeah,
I guess that select play range indexed could be useful because you can bind the key to an index of the index of the range. First, I guess first, second, third range, something like that.
Yeah, use your number keys 1, 2, 3, 4, and have that select ranges inside of a song. And that song, of course, doesn't have to be a song. It could just be a MIDI recording with controller settings, like we did in a couple of weeks ago.
That's light effects, something like that.
Yeah, and have it just jump to that section of the recording and play back those controller moves.
In Performer, you can do that with the buttons. I don't have buttons in software buttons in Solo, but in Performer you have it. You have them, so you could use that instead on an iPad or on the tablet instead of the PC keyboard.
I made that recording for the demo. That might have been in Solo. Yeah, mod wheel up and down. And so we had that. And then I made it so that we could see went up here to view and viewed the timeline. But anyway, I'd be able to save this position or save a left mark, use left marker. Do that, put that one there, put that one there, and now I've got this loop, and it's called temporary range now. I can create a binding to it, or I can save the range. Let's call it range 2. So now you're talking about using the PC keyboard to switch among these. Just create another one here, left bracket, right bracket. Save the play range. And another one was at the beginning, left bracket, right bracket, save that as 1. Okay, so now I've got these 3 that I can move around through. And use the PC keyboard with the bindings to move around through them.
Let's see.
So have this be, change this to 1. And go after my media player.
Media player.
Media player 1.
Then play.
Select
play range.
Next.
Indexed could be.
No. It's a
Third to
range.
last.
Scaled, indexed probably.
Indexed.
And it probably starts with 0. So have that, and then just select this, copy, paste a couple, change this to 2, change that to 3, and make this play range 2, 1, which will be 2, and this one, I'm assuming that's going to be the works. Okay, there's 1. There's 2, just jumps right to it. And 3. Alright, so, this is, 0 is all. Aha! So 0 is all. So I need 1 more of these. So throw in another one. Stop it. Paste. Make that 4. And make that. Alright, now they should behave, so there's 1, 2, 3. And so I could probably have assigned 0 to get me back to 0 and been more consistent here for my reading it. But yeah, there's the idea.
Yeah.
And it probably works with the number pad too. So we'll go ahead and, I gotta turn on numlock. Numpad 0. And that would be cool. 1, 2, 3. There we go. So now, 0, 1, 2, 3. Yay! Right from the number pad. I love doing that kind of stuff. Number pad serves me well in Digital Performer, so I use it a lot. Well, that's awesome. So right from the keypad, able to move around. Excellent use for that. Thanks for recommending that. That is definitely an excellent use. So what are we supposed to do with this one? We're supposed to ha-ha. Media player. Selectors. Create a group. Grab these. Cut. Paste. There we go. We actually have a group now. Isn't that fancy? I'm happy.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. We keep making progress. So let's go ahead and look at some more binding actions here. Engine always interests me. This is what, if I turn all my sounds off, if I do reset all, if I do key range data, or if I send a string expression to the engine, then these things happen. I always find these things that are triggers in Performer curious. That these are what is going to trigger my target, you know? And of course I could have it target something in the engine. If I send it all sounds off, well, that means I may as well restart the darn engine, right? Certainly, all sounds off should not trigger all sounds off, but perhaps reset all. Because if I'm having to do all sounds off, what's that usually mean? It means disaster has ensued. Where's all sounds off again? There it is, F1. So if I push that F1, maybe restarting the engine would be a good thing to happen at the same time, right? Yeah, it triggered it. It did it. It restarted the engine nice and quick. It was the new restart engine. Or to reset everything. I'm always afraid of reset all. But okay, so that's a useful thing for that. And it's triggered by F1, all sounds off. Did you all remember that F1 is all sounds off? I didn't. And what's the use for all sounds off? Stuck MIDI note. Stupid stuck key. Stop
Usually
it.
on an organ.
Yeah,
while doing
usually
the
on an
glissando.
organ after you've done a gliss. Exactly.
I keep one handy in every song. I got the button. You never know.
Yeah. And you can, you don't have to do all sounds off, can't you? You can do an all sounds just to a one VST, can't you?
I think you can.
I think so. Let's take a look. I can have something. Zoop, 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 zoop. No, I don't. Oh, I don't see.
Maybe you have to bind the panic button on that particular VSTI that you. Let's see.
Oh, if it has a
If you
panic
can-
button,
if
yes.
If it has it, okay.
Yeah, if it has it exposed to the automation, which this one doesn't have. Since
I just use the panic button on Cantabile.
Yeah,
And,
just stop them all.
Yeah.
Stop everything. But yeah, I will. You know, I wanted the luxury life of luxury, where I can do it on a VST basis. And if key range data changes, you do something. Another curious item, huh? But boy, I tell you, we sure have the options. We are spoiled with options. Metronome stuff, whether you turn the sounds on and off, whether you've changed the tempo, changed the volume, then something happens. If you change the flash, I mean, you would think, why would I need to change something? Why would I need that to be the source of a trigger? That I can get maybe on changing tempo, perhaps something happening where it stops, stops notes. Maybe that would be a good place to send in all notes off. Who knows? I don't know. Or the volume of your metronome. But using these as triggers, well, it's available so that if in our mad scientist laboratories we find a use for it, we can do it. So,
the really cool thing about all this is brought about from the users and what they need.
that's right. That's true.
Yeah. And Brad is so wonderful about that.
Yeah. Like an hour later, you bring it up in the post an hour later.
Yeah.
Says, well, I'll work on that. And like 5 minutes passes and he's crossed that out. Says, available in version 3692. Yeah. So it's a similar thing. Change the master levels. Oh, another thing I wanted to talk about was another item that is really cool in the routing input section at the top is the transpose. The transpose for the whole system. Every one of your VSTs all gets transposed together. It's a system-wide thing, unless you have checked in the item for it to ignore this. You can make it ignore it. But I've totally ignored this forever, that I can do a transpose. And this will affect everything. Global transpose. So there is a way to make it ignore this somewhere. I don't remember where now.
I think it's on the root up in the input port mapping to something, and then you can set the root.
Tell it to ignore the transpose. Yeah, it might be there.
That one up,
There it is.
one down.
Ignore
That one.
global transpose settings. Ta-da! You hit it. You hit the nail on the head. That's it. So that lets you change everything but that one instrument. So like, especially if that instrument's kind of more of a drum machine, you don't want to be transposing the drum thing. And you don't want to transport something that's mostly making sound effects. Noise type things, loops. I want to leave those alone. So that's where it is. Great, thanks. You remembered. That's where you turn it off. Super cool. All right, back to bindings. And I have just a couple more minutes, and I have to run off to a rehearsal. So this would be a fitting closure to all of this. Is that we went nuts on the bindings just a little bit more, you know what I mean? Oh, of course, the transport is something that drives another action. Is that these are all the things that if the transport does certain things, then it triggers something. And I love things like on position, and you can put a transport position number in here, this position number up here. And wow, and use current position. You can play your thing up to a certain point, which could be a media player tune, and have it when it hits that point, that's what triggers my the fireworks to go off, right? On cross position, another item, cross position. So one is when it gets to a, this might be sending a number out. You know what I mean? No, I'm not sure. Another one to read about, but seems pretty powerful. They even let you do a range. That while the transport's in a range, certain things will be happening. That is something else. A warning light goes off. A flashing red light over the stage starts blinking.
Fireworks.
Then the fireworks. The states that the transport's in, that's interesting. Is that up here, the state? Is that what they mean? State? I wonder. Not sure. Let's make it do something. Well, transport, can't do the transport with a transport. Have it change the view. The live mode. Okay, let's change the state up here and see if it changes something. Nope. I'm not sure what they mean by state. What do you think about that? Play versus stop? Yep, there it is. Play versus stop. Curious. Not sure what just happened. The view just changed, that's for sure. Oh, there's my alarm. Well, anyway, so more and more things for all of us to look into. Now, like I said, that was a nice place to kind of leave us all in a state of confusion. Speaking of states, leave us in a state of confusion. Maybe that's what it means, huh? The transport gets to a state of confusion. So
Brad should add that to the list.
That's right. All right. Well, thanks a lot for coming to all of these. And as I do some more, of course, you'll be notified by email. And
thanks a lot. I can't even remember all the things that I have learned in these webinars. Right. But I'm using Voicemeeter, and I'm using outputs for recording, and have learned so many tricks from you, and so great. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. I feel like bindings, just I'm not lost anymore.
Yeah, it's approachable now,
yeah,
where
yeah.
you don't feel afraid to like try this out and see what the heck it does and kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, I
Yeah.
watched you do it enough. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
That's yeah.
it's like it would be really hard to know all of the different things that you can do with them, especially since just one can have so many options and nuances to just that one. Just the input side has so many nuances, let alone what you make it control. And then you can have the ones that trigger other bindings, because that's the other aspect of Performer, is that bindings can trigger other bindings, as well as trigger the on-off state of an entire, track on your tracks page. It can turn these little check marks on and off, and it
Yeah,
can
the
change
routing stuff
states.
was
It can change states for you from a binding, and that changed state then can make something else occur once it's finished loading, for instance. And so it's
in Performer, can you use bindings to create Midi delays?
several of these bindings have a delay value
maybe
in here. I don't have one loaded in that shows a delay. Let's see. But there are ones that have delays where in milliseconds.
In the 80s, I
There it
used
is.
to
There's
have
one right there.
Uh-huh.
So you can set the delays right here on play.
Okay.
So you push play and there's a certain delay before it actually kicks in and sends out the signal to the output.
So in principle, you could use it to delay a note that it's going through to have a delayed note, delayed.
Yeah, I see that on play, for instance, and you put in a custom value that's going to be the value of the length of your interlude, your lead in, before the media player is going to kick in, before it actually starts playing anything, and or your patter or your intro, or that amazing vocal that you're going to do. Yeah, I'll demonstrate. No, I won't. But
what I had in mind is that in the 80s I used to have a Yamaha MEP4, which was a MIDI effect processor, a MIDI processor. So you could simulate a delay using this unit. So you could program to have notes repeated at regular intervals with decreasing velocity, for instance, to have a decay of the volume.
Yes, I used to fool those MIDI
this
things.
this kind of effects. Okay, so I was wondering if this could be done in using bindings in Cantabile. I was just curious.
Yeah, probably, maybe, be worth a try.
It'd probably be a little complicated.
Back then, speaking of those MIDI effects, I used to use the delays, the MIDI delays, by changing the timings, in conjunction with pan, because it would combine delay and volume pan to totally precisely position an item in the stereo spectrum. And then I used to have this chart, probably still have it around, right nearby, that showed how many milliseconds equaled different settings in the MIDI setting. Well, like I said at the beginning, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do a whole series of walkthroughs on every one of the filters and every one of the bindings at my best ability. And so I'll be uploading those in huge numbers. And I'll send you I'll try to organize myself, send you an email when I actually make each one of those. Since you all registered.
Terry? Yeah. Hey, Terry.
Yeah.
I wanted to thank you for doing this. I've been on you about it for 2 or 3 years now.
I noticed.
and really, it's really informative. But not only that, the camaraderie is really good here too, and it really helps things.
Yeah,
But,
and
but
I
you
agree.
pulled this off very well, and I appreciate it.
oh, thanks. Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
I've been begging somebody to
Agreed.
do this for a
well,
couple of years.
expect there will probably
Yeah.
be a
Yeah.
reprieve of more after the initial walkthrough series happens, and the walkthrough series might also bring about more people that want to attend the webinars too. And I'd like to see that community grow. It would be really fantastic. At the Motu, we've actually started a community. We've got a community of 200 people or so that have been following those webinars. So it'd be great if everybody that's doing it, maybe that would be a good approach to just invite a community building event over just being necessarily straight webinars. Would be something.
You
that's
sure you want to
community-centered.
get a bunch of musicians together like that?
Yeah, I saw from the Motu things that actually is manageable as long as I can mute people.
I can see all the purists walking in the door now.
Okay, well I gotta run. I'll take
All right.
take
Okay.
care.
Terry,
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Derek. Great.
I'm
Take
busy
care.
editing.
Thanks.
You'll have 3 more coming up pretty soon. Okay.
See you.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye.